Good afternoon, and welcome to this Samsung stage on this very warm day here in King's Cross in London. I'm William Perrin. I'm a trustee of Carnegie UK Trust, and my team developed a lot of the policy work that's formed the online regulatory regime in the UK and in the EU. We've got a phenomenal panel here today. We've got Nee Bushnell from Soapbox Labs. We've got Fred Langford, Director of Trust and Safety at Ofcom, and Anna Rafferty, Vice President of Digital Consumer Engagement at the Lego Group. And down the line from Hong Kong, and thank you so much for joining us at this time of night, we've got Ida Hilstead, who's the Chief of Child Rights and Business at UNICEF. So I think we might talk about this in kind of from a global perspective, then come to a global corporation at Lego. And Anna, how do you manage this, with your incredible range of products, your commitment to children, how do you manage to balance the risks and opportunities to kids in digital environments?
That sounds like such a small question, and it's such an enormous question. I'm very lucky. Hello, everybody. You're right, I work for a big global corporation, a big toy brand, but also it is a brand that a company has been going for 90 years, and it's been going for 90 years. It's our birthday this year, not anniversary, but birthday. And through that time, I think you will know us for thoughtful, careful, trusted, joyful, exciting play. That's what we create, that's what we invest in, that's what we make for children. And the power of play, what play does to children's development, what we call inspiring and developing the builders of tomorrow through learning through play, is something that through that 90 years has been incredibly important to us in everything that we make, and now is still important to us as we go into our next 90 years as we create digital products, experiences and play for children. So I suppose the answer to your question is, how do we balance it? There's lots of very specific answers to that, but maybe I'll start with, I guess, why we balance it. And why we balance it is because it is fundamental to us. It's our core value. It's making sure that the digital play that we create and bring to the children of the world is just as wonderful and beneficial to them as their physical play is. And then how we do it is using all of the the practices and thought and care, and by design, thinking about everything that we make sure, safety by design, everything we consider when we think about physical toys is also part of our digital play development. So that means it needs to be fun and it needs to be good in both those things. Now, there's a subset of bullet points as to what that really means, and how you balance it is just by really caring about it and prioritizing it and making it important in the organization, and not an afterthought, not a checklist, and not a kind of quality assurance tick box at the end, but fundamental upfront from the beginning.
From the beginning, and of course, a company driven by that play ethos and driven by children. You don't have an adult product that's accidentally being used by kids, right? It's for kids.
Kids are at the heart of our proposition. We have adult play for sure, but absolutely we start from the child. And so in practical terms, what this means with developing all of our kind of decision making for all toys and play, digital and physical, is that we also want to represent children's voices in that process. So we'll obviously think about them, test with them, speak to them and listen to them and think about, well, what does it mean to them to have good digital play? Or particularly important to me, and you'll hear me repeatedly talk about it, how can we make sure that we are addressing their well-being in their digital experience as well as their safety?
Thank you. Let's try again with Ida, see if the connections improve from Bangkok, I think, not from Hong Kong. Now, UNICEF has been devoted to looking after children's well-being since 1946. What's your perspective on the digital realm?
So is this better now?
No, you're on. No sound coming through.
No.
That's better.
No sound.
Keep going.
No. Okay. Well, let me get back to the children's right to business principles, but I think you still have a bad connection though.
It's okay. Keep going.
Okay. So basically, the principles built on the UN Guiding Principles and consumer rights, they really articulated for the very first time the ways that business impact on children's rights, going beyond child labour. And in addition to respecting child rights, principles speak of companies' role in supporting children's lives, or going above and beyond to make a positive contribution to children's rights and well-being. And they urge companies to fight the marketplace, ensuring that services are safe, that they can support children's rights through them. This is so relevant in the context of developing and designing digital products and services. And another milestone, sorry, for the big UN document references, but it's the adoption of the General Comment 25 on children's rights in relation to the digital environment. This is an authoritative document that clarifies how the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child should be understood and implemented by states. And it affirms that every right of every child must be respected, protected, and fulfilled in the digital environment. So we have two really critical issues that come out of the new document relevant for companies, and which is about how they must consider when they develop and design services that are used by children, but not only those specifically target children as the primary audience, that they respect children's rights. That means doing no harm, privacy, to the range of other online risks. And of course, the support element. Here, what you're coming and particularly about the right project. So, the right project.
The line is breaking up a little again, I'm afraid. Can I just pause you there for a second? And maybe turn to Niamh. So we have these overarching global principles and human rights, very lofty, very well-intentioned, but quite remote. A global corporation with huge resources built on pre-existing products. How do you do this with a startup SME focused on products for children? How does it work for you on the ground?
You start by putting the child at the center and building technology from the ground up for children. So, I mean, and it's not a balance, it's a non-negotiable, you know. So just to step back for a second, so Soapbox Labs is a voice tech company, so we build voice AI for kids. So think of Alexa and Siri, but that kids can actually, their voices can actually be understood. That's Soapbox. So kids are so different to adults. They're not a side dish, they're not small adults. And that's from every single perspective, physically, psychologically, privacy-wise, behavior-wise. Everything about them is totally unique, and you cannot re-engineer, no matter how hard you try or no matter how much money you spend, you cannot re-engineer something that's built for adults to work properly, for kids to actually work effectively for them, but also to work safely for them. And so Soapbox from 2013 built a privacy by design, kids first voice technology that is safe for kids to use and that understands them, whether they're learning English, whether they're learning to read, whether they're playing a game, whether they're in the metaverse, in an experience, and protects them in those environments and understands their voices.
But for an SME, someone starting up with all the challenges of cash flow and managing a business, isn't it just a really expensive way of developing the product? Doesn't it add a huge amount of overhead? I mean,
Totally.
How does that affect your bottom line and your sales?
You know, we always say this, it's a great question. It wasn't cheaper, it wasn't faster, it was very painful. It took forever to build voice technology that didn't make any compromises when it came to voice data and when it came to kids. So, you know, we started in 2013, we commercialized in 2018, 2019. So, I mean, that's a deep tech company anyway, but a deep tech company that's a small company needs to focus and then needs to just decide that fundamentally you're not going to make any compromises when it comes to kids and just double down on that. So the plus side of it is that then you get known as, oh, you're the voice tech company for kids. You know, my job as a branding person is much easier because that's all we do and that's what we do best.
So by starting from that initial design of saying this has got to be safe for kids, you can now offer a product to big global corporations the way you start and say, ours is compliant.
Exactly.
Ours does the hard thing. Yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Built right from the get-go.
Now, this is tremendous. So we've got this great unification between the global rights approach, global corporations, SMEs, and then if it all goes wrong, Fred, we come down to regulation. And there's loads of regulation happening in the UK at the moment, and in Europe, in Australia, in Canada, possibly some more in New Zealand. I saw this morning Nigeria's just come out with a social media regulatory code. How does the regulator fit into all this?
Well, hello, everybody. Well, I mean, the regulator for those that don't necessarily know what a regulator does, we regulate on the legislation that Parliament passes. So the Parliament is making the ultimate decisions, obviously in consultation with the regulator and many others. You would have seen committee hearings, etc. I'm not going to say it's easy, but what I would like to point out straight away is the vast majority of experiences online by kids are positive. And we've seen that. We published our Ofcom Online Nations report last week, which highlighted that as well. But really the regulator's here as a backstop, as a check, to see that the industry are doing what they say they're going to do, or what they said they are doing to the regulator, and then to try and work with them, if possible, if there are issues that we're made aware of, to try and resolve those issues in a beneficial way without stifling any innovation. Because like you say, the majority of the focus has been on the very large platforms, but that doesn't help the SMEs, and Ofcom does have a role to have consideration for the cost of implementing any solutions that we would like them to do as part of regulation. So we do have to think of SMEs, but we also work as part of something called the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum. So this is Ofcom, the Information Commissioner's Office, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Markets Authority as well. So if there were an issue to do with competition, we can work very closely with those guys and say, well, actually, this is your area of regulation, but this is what we think is happening. Leave it to you guys to work on it, because we need to work collectively to be able to make sure that we're not being played off each other like parents.
It sounds a voice of bitter experience with child-minding there. Anna, at Lego, doubtless you have the resources to form opinions on what you want governments to do with these regulatory regimes. What is it, as a global corporation, what is it you want to see governments doing when they set these new regulations at a general level?
I loved hearing you say the word innovation there, because I think that is perhaps, that's a fundamental position for us, in that, of course, our position starts from ensuring that the right regulation, legislation is set in place to protect from harm and to keep children with all of their unique vulnerabilities and strengths safe and in an appropriate space. But it doesn't end there. And actually what we really we would love governments, but also the industry, to be able to articulate much more the benefits for children with the right thoughtful technology and digital play and experiences, and to incentivize, to think about how to incentivize good. What does good look like? So from my point of view, what does good digital play look like? How can we show patterns? How can we incentivize organizations? And that is, I think, where we believe that governments have got a role to play. So beyond that protective position, which is very understandable and essential, but much more expansive and much more focused on innovation, creativity, what we can add to a child's life using technology and play.
Super. And I'm going to try Ida again and see how the line's doing. From a UNICEF perspective, is that what you want to hear from companies? And what are you hearing from governments about the way they're approaching regulation?
Yes, I think there's really a lot of different initiatives happening in terms of regulation, which is so important. I think one thing we need to keep in mind as well is that government are the ultimate duty bearer when it comes to protecting children's rights. So their role is absolutely key to make sure that we get this right. For example, coming back to those principles and standards that we refer to, General Comment 25 also talks about how states need to make sure and require that the business sector undertake child rights due diligence. That means carrying out child rights impact assessments, means disclosing them to the public, special consideration giving to data at times severe impacts of the digital environment of children. So it's absolutely critical.
And Niamh, how does an SME fit into many layers of regulation? Is a child rights impact assessment appropriate for you to be doing, or do you see it captured in other bits of regulation at a lower level?
I mean, we are COPPA compliant, GDPR compliant. We are annually certified by a safe harbor company in the States called Prevo. So we like to tick all of those boxes from a regulatory perspective. We're very excited about things like the Children's Code, Design Code here. There's one in California now as well. There's regulations going through Congress in the States that we're kind of bigging up and promoting while we can. But we'd like to think of ourselves as almost ahead of the regulation, that we want to be the poster child for doing it properly for kids, because companies do have a choice. You know, they don't have to wait for regulation. Regulation is so important and it has to be there. But you can lead the regulation and you can help accelerate that regulation by showing that you can have a business that doesn't, for example, have as part of its business model selling or reusing kids' data, kids' voice data in our case, or kids' data of any kind, to advertise to them or to sell them products or to put them in danger. So, you know, yeah, so we tick all the boxes from a regulatory perspective. We're a cheerleader for regulation, but technology companies have to play a role in being ahead of regulation and accelerating its path.
And Fred, so Ofcom, a regulator I played a large role in creating 12, 14 years ago. Sometimes it can feel like it's in a bit of an ivory tower as you sit there thinking great thoughts about compliance regimes and so on. How can you as a regulator get out to talk to SMEs like Neve and others more?
Well, I mean, there's a variety of ways we can do that. We convene multi-stakeholder events as well, and me being here, we're getting out more.
Are you handing out business cards later?
Not quite yet, but it's engaging with people and understanding what the concerns are and the challenges are from people. And we're only going to learn that from going out and meeting people and coming to events, listening to people's questions. Like William said, we can't do that all just talking in our own echo chamber within Ofcom's offices. So it's really key that we get out there. And just to pick up on Neve's point as well, which is very much about talking about that innovation and how we can stimulate innovation. So the online safety bill that we're predominantly focusing on at the moment in Ofcom is very much around systems and processes. But to be able to understand whether or not a system or process was working as it should do, you need to understand all the technology that is being applied. And actually, what it does do, sometimes it highlights some of the gaps. And to your point as well, it's about, well, that doesn't necessarily mean we want to regulate the gaps. We want to encourage that innovation. And quite a lot of the time, it's the SMEs that are nimble and agile enough to be able to address that. And so they're much quicker at pushing forward and then showing the larger organisations what they can do by example.
And in the larger organisations, what's your, Anna, do you have any great examples at Lego of products, online products carefully designed to enhance children's experience?
I have a favourite example that I like to talk about. But safety by design is built into all of our digital products. And again, I feel very lucky to work for an organisation that prioritises that and pays for it. And for instance, pays for 100% human pre-moderation of all kids' UGC and things like that, which is not to be underestimated in terms of what that means. But I suppose my favourite example, which is a small one, is in that process of moderation. As you can imagine, so we encourage creativity in children. Like Lego toys are, we believe, the bricks are a creative medium, and we see children, using their imagination, expressing themselves with them. And we've created one experience which is called Lego Life, and it's a safe social environment. Children can contribute to it. They use their voice. They can, make friends. But we also encourage them to showcase their creativity, not just with their bricks, but certainly with their bricks. And so they take photographs of what they've made and they upload it and they share it and they're proud of it. And of course, we need to make sure that anything they share won't put them at any risk. And so we moderate it. And it's very disappointing, as you can imagine, if a child does make a creation, make a video or make a photograph of something they've built, and it doesn't get approved. So we've taken real care with that sort of liminal space of the moderation experience to make that not feel like a sort of computer says no process, but actually in itself to be joyful and to help teach them and give them skills. So if there's a reason why something isn't going to be published for them, one of our non-playable characters, for instance, will have a dialogue with the child and start explaining to them what they could do differently, how they should refocus that, why this might be not a great idea. And usually, to be honest, it's about photography skills. But it turns into something which isn't a process to keep them safe, but actually an experience that they enjoy, and they don't even know that they're learning. They feel like they're playing. And of course, that's bang on brand for us, but it's that sort of example, that is that spirit that I want to pull through, and we attempt to and prioritise pulling through all of our digital experiences for children.
That is wonderful. As a very disorganized parent, I'm in love with the app that allows me to take a photo of a random box of Lego and tell me what I can build with it.
Art.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, Niamh, you must have a huge range of moderation challenges at Soapbox or recording challenges. What could you talk to that
Well, so we are the technology, so we're the deep tech, we're the AI company, right? So we don't build front-end products for kids, but our technology powers voice-enabled experiences for kids who are learning to read, who are learning a new language, who are playing games, who have accessibility challenges, who are dyslexic and need to be screened, who need speech therapy. So there's so many different use cases. Once you get voice right and you allow a kid to use their own voices to learn and to play and to grow and to build their confidence, the world is kind of their oyster. It's just such a beautiful, magical thing, and we talk a lot about how our technology is used in education a lot. People may have seen we did a big deal, for example, at the start of the year with McGraw-Hill, who are planning to voice enable a lot of their mainstream and supplemental programs for kids in schools, because kids are playing games and having interactive digital experience outside of school, and then when they go into school or have a remote learning experience, it's kind of this really poor experience. So companies like that are using our technology, and we think they're using it for things like assessment and for things like helping kids to practice. But imagine a kid who, because their voice is understood, can sit in their bedroom with their mobile phone and practice their reading that they know they're going to be asked in the classroom to read out loud someday soon, that they can use our voice technology to practice reading and get immediate feedback that builds their confidence, so that when they go into the classroom and the teacher goes, "Okay, Mary, your turn," they're ready. So there's all of that social, emotional, confidence building, agency, independence, all of that stuff that goes with it. I don't know if that's answered your question, William. I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there.
It's good enough. Thank you very much. And it's fascinating, as you say, when you get voice right.
Yeah.
The potential is colossal.
Totally.
But if we get it wrong, there's going to be a backlash.
It's building from the ground up for kids.
Yeah.
Have the kid at the center and build from there. Don't pull in technology from here, there, and everywhere and try and make it work. That's how it works. It's not magic. In the end of the day, it's just a lot of expense and time and commitment.
Yeah. It's a good old customer-focused design. Now, Ida in Bangkok where it's very late. It's going to have to drop off in a moment. I just wonder, Ida, if you had any final observations listening to this discussion before you drop off and we move to questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. But I did want to, and it's linked to what was just mentioned as well, I did think it would be important to mention the RITEC, the Responsible Innovation and Technology for Children project, which is funded by UNICEF and the LEGO Group, and funded by the LEGO Foundation, which is exactly about working and developing with children around the world a framework that maps how the design of children's digital experiences affects their well-being. And I think this is a way of actually moving from to not only think about things in conceptual level, but to the concrete level. So how do we enable companies to consider children's well-being when they design the digital spaces? So watch that space, and maybe Anna can speak more to it, because it's really exciting what's happening here.
Thank you very much, and good night in Bangkok. Now, Anna, do you have a final word on RITEC before you have to dash and do something? Tell everyone what you're going to do now. Very exciting.
I do have to, I'm afraid. I have to go to the Women's Prize for Fiction Awards. But I do want to, because the LEGO Group has partnered with UNICEF and the University of Western Sydney and various other academics for RITEC. And if you didn't catch it, that's Responsible Innovation for Technology with Children. And the first report was published a few weeks ago, and essentially it's a framework for well-being for designing digital experiences for children in consultation with children in 13 countries around the world, and there's 8 characteristics, and it's very much focused on, as Ida was saying, and I think I was too, what is this, what's the benefit, how can we impact positive, constructive impacts through our digital experiences, our play, the products, even if they're not designed for children actually, but children might be there, which is a whole other story. I know you alluded to it. and to be a really constructive, thoughtful piece of research to start from, to actually base it on data, like what does that well-being mean, and then what does good look like, which is how the project will continue. And so I do urge everybody. It's published, obviously, on the UNICEF website, and I hope it's very useful and helpful, because we really want it to help SMEs and all companies, all organisations who want to build things for children or that children might access.
Super. Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry that I do
dash across town.
Away. Yes.
Dash away. And that's a great example of companies with the resources, big global companies, getting ahead of regulation, working with regulators to set the rules. Now, we're going to take some questions from the floor. I think we have some roving mics. And this gentleman here, if you could wait for the mic, because then that gets into the video feed. Thank you. Could you tell us who you are, sir, and what's your question?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Paul Eastman. I'm at Kraft Heinz, but it's not relevant to the question. Actually, I have a couple of young kids, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And this is a very thoughtful panel, and the first panel that's given me any hope. I've spent quite a lot of time looking at stuff around metaverse over the last few days, and I guess my take was the platforms and the businesses love dollars, and they care about dollars. The scientists and the professors and the computer geeks love computers and technology and have forgotten the kid and the human. So apart from this, I've left all those conversations feeling less hopeful about the future for my kids. And I'm more nervous about allowing them into the online world than I was, because I didn't trust the people around the technology. So why, in your view, why should I be hopeful? My 8-year-old, I can't stop him yet. My 4-year-old isn't there yet. So when my 4-year-old gets there, why should I be more hopeful in a few years' time that actually it's going to be a safe, healthy environment for children to be in?
I think certainly in the case of the metaverse, and I'm on my third Oculus set now. I started with the original Rift and spent a lot of time messing around, and walkabout mini golf is definitely my you love walkabout. Yeah, everybody does. It's the best thing, right? One of the hopes for the metaverse is that we're having these regulatory conversations right at the outset. So Meta, Facebook came up with a new set of rules only 48 hours ago, I think, to govern behaviours in the spaces they've created. And our approach at Carnegie has always been that if you're creating a public space that you own and run for profit, you do have to bear responsibility for what goes on in there, and it shouldn't harm people, especially not minors. And we're having this conversation at the beginning of that technology rollout, not 10 years after it's already out of the bag. So the online safety regime in the UK will almost certainly cover the metaverse. We're reasonably confident in that. I think the DSA will, I'm not really sure. But also I think Meta in that case has learned. But there are lots of other versions of the metaverse. We don't quite know how it's going to turn out. Some of them will be brilliant. Some of them won't be. And that's when we come back to this difficult task you're grappling with of parents supporting children in these tricky environments. But I wondered if Niamh or Fred in particular.
Yeah, I can certainly dive in, and I mean, I'll echo what Will has just said about the regulation and getting in there early, and it's certainly something. I mean, I've got various members of my team who are huge gamers anyway, and an absolute fascination. And myself, I'm always looking at future technology, so I'll broaden that out and say it's not just virtual, it's augmented reality as well in any XR. And how quickly are these products going to come to market? How are people going to be tracked around? How are people going to communicate with each other? How are they going to interoperate? And then by working together and trying to build these and getting in early, hopefully we don't need to do too much in the way of the enforcement end of regulation. We can encourage innovation. And I think Will's right. I mean, we're already seeing changes as well. And so Meta do come out and announce changes when they're making it. But there are many other metaverses out there. Don't just think there's just one. How they're going to communicate with each other. And I just I've been in this business for a long time. I'd just like to say that it's not the first time there have been huge, great organisations. I'm thinking of Second Life and Linden Dollars, and it's going back a few years now. But there was a lot of fear and concern about that, and a lot of them were realised as well. But I think the challenge for us really is about the physical nature as well. It's just adding a physical nature to some of the potential harms in there. But again, to talk about mini golf, walk the plank, any of the other ones you want to try out on there, they're good fun. And actually, but we're trying to work out, well, where does that limitation lie on the physical risk? Because there are physical risks. I'm sure you've all seen the YouTube videos of people doing stupid things while they've got VR headsets on. But also, how will that play out in the real world? I mean, more for augmented reality for us, and you're seeing Snap have got glasses, Google Glass, and there's all sorts of others, but there's HoloLens as well, and what you can do, and how would we be able to potentially regulate for things that only certain individuals will see in certain scenarios. So there's lots of challenges, but because we're starting these discussions very, very early, and because of things like, I say, the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, working with people like the Information Commissioner's Office who are concerned about the protection of the data, I think that we're in a fairly good place. That said, there are always going to be people who are trying to cause harm to others, and in that respect is how quickly can industry respond to complaints or reports of harms in those and take appropriate action.
And to that point, Fred, I'll pick up on that. There are technology innovations that will help and that will make you feel more comfortable as a parent too, that are coming to the fore. I mean, today, if you're a kid trying to get on a game, for example, that you shouldn't have access to, you just either have to self-confirm, yes, I'm over 15 or 18 or whatever it is, or there's that one end, which is, you kick down the gate. The other end is you have to provide your passport. Now, even if you had access to your passport as a kid, you don't want your kid to be giving your passport details to a platform. So there in the middle is regulation, and there is innovation that is answering these questions very, very quickly, I think, in the next year or two. So biometrics, for example, that you will have as a user on your phone that will do voice or facial recognition, but never share that information, but that will just check back. So it's not going into the cloud, it's not going to a vendor, it's not being held somewhere else, but that is on your own device, is something that's coming very quickly. So we will have technologies that are safe technologies, that are built safe, that will allow kids to have more freedom. I mean, voice moderation, we're talking to a lot of gaming companies now about voice moderation. You can use voice AI to understand tone, to understand bad language, and to pick up on these things and moderate. Now you have all these human moderators who cost a fortune. You can actually use technology to very effectively to do a lot of that work for you. So as technology advances and your kids have more fun with technology, these safety and civility related technologies are also advancing, and hopefully, will come to a point where they're really, really helping kids and making sure that they can have those experiences in a safe environment.
Now, just before you, if any more questions, just stick your hand up. We'll get a mic to you. But Fred, quickly.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly finish off there as well. I mean, as part of the online safety bill, there is an expectation, well, there's a requirement, a regulatory requirement to carry out a risk assessment based upon the likelihood of your users. So when you're talking in the scenario of your kids using this, there is an increased amount of focus going to be on these sorts of platforms because of the risk to kids. Because the products are being targeted at kids. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more reassurance that we're thinking about that.
Thanks, Fred. The red jacket in the third row there.
Hi, I'm Giselle. I'm the CEO of DataKind. We're a charity that helps other charities use data science. And so my question, perhaps predictably, is around charities. We've talked a bit about business, but we help a lot of charities that are helping families and young people. So we supported Action for Children recently on their Parent Talk service, which is IMs basically, and that the sector is really struggling to keep up, but it's often the social sector that is at the sharp end when things do go wrong for people, for children in particular who are in online spaces and are getting bullied, or things that go wrong in other ways. So just thoughts on how we can, I guess, level up the sector and ensure we can actually provide the support that's needed.
So I'm from a 120-year-old philanthropic foundation. I'm from a family of philanthropists. The answer is very simple. If anyone in this room has become suddenly wealthy through their brilliant tech product, there is a tax offset that's completely legitimate in the UK and in the USA that you can use to give money to DataKind. So that's what I urge you to do. And we don't see enough of that, I think, in tech philanthropy in the UK. I think in the USA, there's this old notion, it's just baked into the American social settlement, that if you raise loads of money, you give generously as well. It's part of what you do. In the UK, not so much. And I think that's a shame, because we need to have a thriving, multi-sectoral approach. Charities, wealthy industrialists, philanthropists, all working together to make this thing better. In the interest of getting other questions in, there were a couple of others in the front here. The mic's coming down to you.
Presentation is. Hi there, I'm Evelyn. I'm a founder of Elite My Consultancy, which is organizational well-being. We do develop some products for children as well. But my question was really about the issue of safeguarding. And I think when we design products from start, it's all very well to build for children and with them in mind. But my question is about how do we address when things have already gone wrong, right? And we have places that have not been built for children, yet children are there. We have platforms that are being used in a way that shouldn't have been. And we are seeing this whole damage on children's mental health by social media, like Instagram, self-image, even things like children using TikTok to as a diary, as a private diary, to document their eating disorder progress and things like that. So when things already gone wrong, what can we do about that? And it's not really necessarily a question to the company itself, but what can we do as parents? What can we do as startups, innovators, people who are creating those alternatives or maybe even challenging what's been wrong?
Thank you very much. Could I ask for quick answers, then we can get another question in before we time out?
Yes, I should probably dive in there. So prior to joining Ofcom, I spent 16 years working for an organisation called the Internet Watch Foundation, which stops child sexual abuse content online. So I'm well versed in safeguarding and what can go wrong. I would say actually to the point previously, there are a lot of fantastic charities out there supporting, and I think signposting and making sure that those charities are at the point of where the safeguarding is needed, and I think that's a real challenge for NGOs, charities, and for government-funded bodies as well. It's at the point that they need that help, and where are the signals that you're seeing and this behaviour online, and how can you quickly direct them? Now, there are challenges here, as you know, because you start getting into is that thought police? Is that really what the person was doing? Do they really want to be referred? But it is a challenge. But I think most of that for us is around media literacy. So we have media literacy, and it's much more about the education and trying to make sure that when somebody does need help, that the help to either report or seek some sort of assistance is at the point where they need to find it as quickly as possible.
Niamh, anything quickly to add?
No, I'm good.
With the red hair.
Perfect. So hi, I'm Katie. I'm an A-level student and an entrepreneur. And my question was mainly about, in terms of policy, how are you able to ensure that kids are at the centre of that process as well? So I know most kids just get insanely infuriated by these apps that will come up and say, no, you can't have access to this website for your homework, because it's been blocked off by a parental control. And so most kids end up then hacking the system, getting through it anyway. But as much as we like it, that's always going to happen. How are you going to be able to bring kids into the process of policy making so that this gets rid of the problem and they understand?
Great question.
Sure. It is a challenge, and particularly for kids under 13 to get their views as well. And I won't try and second guess what our lawyers would say about it, so I'll probably not say too much there. But really it's about trying to engage with those organisations that already have established communities of kids. The struggle is getting kids, a good cross-section of kids from the community to actually engage. So it tends to be the more affluent kids whose parents spend more time with them, who engage on these topics, rather than having a full demographic of different kids from different backgrounds, different cultures actually providing their input. I can't say I've got the answer to it. It is a real challenge. But I would say any way that you can encourage anybody from those other demographics to engage. There are places on Ofcom that you can see that you can try and sign up to provide your views and to show those challenges. I do take your point on parental controls, that is a challenge. I've just given my eldest daughter her phone for the first phone, and I'm a technologist, and even negotiating through what I could and couldn't give her access to and what was or wasn't getting through. Right. And as a technologist, I knew that she could potentially hack things as well, so a challenge.
I think that's a great point to end on. Thank you very much for that question, because we're here in King's Cross, this beautiful regenerated landscape, and if you cross York Way that way, you end up in the Bemerton Estate, which is one of the poorest places in the whole of the United Kingdom. I think the challenge for all of us here today is to work out how we, as articulate, educated technologists, can work with people from the Bemerton estate to actually make better products that are safer for all kids. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.